Oddly enough, I recorded chapter 9 before chapter 8, so now I'm doing chapter 8, doing everything backwards today. So let's go ahead and get started. This chapter is about adolescence, as much fun as that will be. Adolescence, markers of adolescence. Normally, people go through a rite of passage. Of course, you go through puberty, where your secondary sexual characteristics develop. But there are rites of passage. Of course, the Dene have Canalda. The Apache have Nia S. I'm going to show pictures of all this in just a second. Rites of passage may include religious blessings. The Jewish people have bar mitzvah, a bar mitzvah for females, bar mitzvah for males. Separation from the family. Some groups in Africa will separate the males same way the males from the females. They'll give the individual a new name, and he can't live with his mother anymore. Severe tests of strength and endurance in some tribal groupings in Africa. The individual has to kill a lion in order to become a man. Marking the body in some way or acts of magic. Circumcision, of course, in some select groups. The Aborigines of Australia circumcise their males, and then acts of magic, of course. It all begins with puberty. Puberty is where the secondary sexual characteristics begin. This, of course, leads to sexual maturity and, of course, fertility when they can finally have produced children. This is a picture of, this is a menorah. That's a Jewish candelabra. And this is bar mitzvah, where he has to read from the Torah. This is a school in Africa where the individuals graduate from school. This is where the female dances after she goes through puberty. This is the Na'i-S ceremony of the Apache. Very similar to Finalda, but not exactly the same. In some places, you prove that you are an adult by drinking from a beer bong. This has to do with being Catholic and going through your first communion, where you get to wear a white dress and take your first communion. And that is around age 12, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not Catholic, so I'm not really sure. Quincineria is for Latinas. They become a woman at 15, and quince is Spanish for 15. So quinceañera is a celebration of being 15, and this, of course, is the young lady that's being celebrated, and she's having a large ceremony. That's her mother, I believe, and those are her aunts, if I'm not mistaken. Things happen. She gets her first drink of alcohol. She's drinking wine here with whoever her escort is. Could be a cousin. It probably isn't, though. That's her mother. We saw her mother in the last picture. Yeah, well, that's her mother, I guess, and that's her grandmother or something. Anyway, there's her family. And of course, it's a big day for everyone. She gets flowers, and everybody has a big party. And it's her coming out party, quinceañera. Canalda. I got this off the internet, so don't throw rocks at me if some of this is incorrect, or if where you are you do this differently. This is a 5-day ritual. The first day, the individual that is being introduced into the tribe as an adult female, they comb her hair, they dress her in special clothes. She molds a something. She molds a cake of some kind. She runs every day. She'll run. She needs to show that she can do these things. She needs to grind corn. She puts a pot of wheat near the outdoor cooking fire after she does her molding. I'm not sure. I did this a long time ago. The second day, she runs again. She grinds corn again. She spreads the wheat in the sun to dry after digging a pit to create her canalda cake. She soaks corn husks while working on the batter for her canalda cake. The third day, she runs again, grinds corn. She digs a pit. She builds a fire. She makes mush, and there's the blue mush. She puts batter in a pit. She blesses it. She covers the pit. Gathers soapweed root and white clay for the next morning during the singing that takes place. Fourth day, she runs. She runs to the east while four songs are sung. One 12-word song, unless the ceremony is the first canalda. When this song is omitted, she makes an offering to Mother Earth. She prepares white clay basket during the racing songs. She lifts children after the molding. The girl goes back into her hogan after returning the goods that people have given her, and she reties. And in there, her hair is retied as an adult, and it's a 4-day ceremony. I'm sorry, I said it was a 5-day ceremony. It's a 4-day ceremony. Opportunities and risks of adolescence, and you guys know more about this than I do, and probably half of this is incorrect, and I've misidentified things, but there are pictures. It's difficult to find these pictures. When I was researching this before I came to the Navajo Nation, um, I, um, I taught the same class in Clinton, Iowa, and the example that I used was not the Canalda, but the Nia S, the coming of age ceremony for the Apache, and of course all that was there were videos and whatnot, but I haven't been able to find the Canalda ceremony, which is fine. I mean, this is not for public consumption anyway, and so I'm probably very, very wrong in this, and so you can correct me, and I won't mind. That's okay. Opportunities and risks of adolescence, opportunities for growth. They grow physically, they grow cognitively, they become more intelligent, they develop social competence, they achieve autonomy where they don't have to be taken care of by their parents as much as they did in the past. They can do what they become responsible, so they become more autonomous. They hopefully they develop self-esteem, and eventually, of course, they may develop intimacy with someone. There are risks of adolescence, difficult handling, so many changes at once, and the individual may need help in overcoming dangers along the way. There are lots of risks out there. Uh, there's peer pressure to drink. There's peer pressure to use drugs. There's peer pressure to get into sexual activity, and this is one of the ways that the individual. That's about the only way you can get pregnant. But someone may impregnate someone when they're relatively young, or the young lady may have a teenage pregnancy. And there's always gang activity that is out there. This is there's 3 different colors. Usually, with gangs, they have the same color, but in this case, I guess their gang identifies themselves by wearing a bandana over their nose and mouth. I guess I'm used to the Crips and Bloods. How puberty begins, there's a sharp increase in the production of sex hormones, which leads to a rapid growth in height and weight for both males and females, changes in body proportions and form, attainment of sexual maturity. Estrogen increases by 8 times the estradiol production in the female body, which makes her look more feminine. Her hips widen, her breasts grow, and we're going to talk about secondary sexual characteristics. And of course, the male grows, has an increase of androgens, especially testosterone, which can be 20 times higher in males. It's 20 times higher than in males than it is in females. The estradiol, of course, which makes her a female, the testosterone makes him a male because of the excessive amount of testosterone. And the estradiol in the female makes her able to reproduce. It also makes him able to reproduce, but it gives him a different body shape, males and females. Now, curiously, and we can talk about estrogen, we can talk about estradiol and testosterone if you like. If she decides she would rather be a male than a female, they can give her shots that will repress her estradiol and will increase her testosterone so that she looks more like this than like this. And of course, as far as he's concerned, he they can give him medications. The medication they would give him to repress his testosterone would probably be HGH, or not HGH, HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, and that would suppress his testosterone. And then they can give him shots of estradiol, which will allow him to grow breast tissue and for his hair, facial hair, and body hair to go away primarily. And that's the way it works. His musculature will be less extensive. Right now, you can see he's pretty puffed up, pretty beefed up. He's ripped, as they say. And if they give him estradiol, it will allow him to grow breast tissue, and his body hair will go away, especially his facial hair. Won't change his male pattern baldness if he's bald. I had a brother-in-law that decided he wanted to be a female, and now she is a bald-headed lady. He was going bald before he started taking estradiol, and now she is a bald-headed lady. There's a 7-year range for the onset of puberty in both boys and girls. The process typically takes about 4 years for both sexes and begins about 2 or 3 years earlier in girls than in boys. In the last chapter, I said 2 years. These two individuals are in the same grade, and as you can see, he's about a head shorter than she is. That's because she has started puberty before he has. They're probably in the 4th or 5th grade, maybe the 6th grade, depending on, well, there's a lot of things it depends on. Timing sequence and signs of maturation. The average age for boys is age 12, sometime between age 9 and 16. Average age for girls is 9. That's between the ages of 6 and 14. The signs, adolescent growth spurt, they will have a growth spurt. They will develop pubic hair. Both the males and females will get a deeper voice. The male's voice will get deeper than the females. What's the difference between boys and girls as far as their voice is concerned? The males have a prominent voice box that you can see. It's called an Adam's apple, and females never do, rarely do. And of course, muscular growth in both males and females. The male shoulders will broaden. His hips will stay the same size. As far as females are concerned, their hips will broaden so that they can reproduce. Their shoulders will get a little bit larger, not like the male shoulders. And of course, they will grow breast tissue. These are all secondary sexual characteristics. These are the primary sexual characteristics. This is what males and females are born with. The females born with ovaries, fallopian tubes, their uterus, and their vagina. Those are all there when they are born, as they develop inside the womb. The male is born with testes. He has a penis. The scrotum, of course, is the sac that carries the testes. Inside, he has seminal vesicles and prostate gland, which in the future, when he matures, will allow him to create semen and reproduce. The secondary sexual characteristics are what happens to him and her uh, when uh, when they go through puberty. This is what a little boy looks like. This is what a man looks like. Um, Lots of different things. Females, of course. This is a female child, and this is a female adult. So what happens as far as the male is concerned? They'll grow. Their testicles will grow so that they can reproduce. They'll grow pubic hair, and we're not exactly sure why they grow pubic hair, but both males and females will grow pubic hair. Their chest will get bigger. They will start growing hair in their armpits, which allows the odor, the sexual odor of this individual to be broadcast, which probably has something to do with the pubic hair. They'll have muscle growth. As you can see, the little boy is small shouldered, and the man is much broader shouldered. Their voice will get deeper, and that's because of their Adam's apple. As far as a female is concerned, her breasts will enlarge so that she will be able to breastfeed. She will get an enlargement of the uterus and the vagina to some extent. It will get larger, of course. The narrowing of the shoulders, I said that her shoulders grew as well, but according to this, her shoulders narrow, her hips will widen so that she can bear children. Her voice will, her voice actually gets deeper, but she'll have a higher pitched voice than the male, and of course she will grow pubic hair. Now the interesting thing about well, she'll also grow underarm hair and she grows leg hair. But the interesting thing about the male pubic hair growth, they have different growth patterns. Male pubic hair growth goes up to the umbilicus, and female pubic hair growth rarely goes up to the umbilicus, the belly button. And here is when they all happen. Uh, the first thing that happens is the female breasts grow. First thing that happens with the male is his testes and scrotal sac will extend. The next thing that happens is for the female is she starts growing pubic hair, and the male, that's the second thing that happens to them, and then their bodies start to grow, and then everything happens after that, of course. Males can reproduce as soon as their sperm appears, which is not really true. In order for a male to reproduce, he needs copious numbers of sperm. One of the big complaints that we've been looking at, or one of the problems that we've been looking at over the last 60 or 70 years, is that sperm counts are declining. Um, it's difficult for a male to reproduce if he doesn't produce a very large number of sperm, and that number is somewhere in the hundreds of millions, 100 million, somewhere between 100 and 300 million sperm per mil. A mil is a teaspoon, I think, pretty close to a teaspoon. So he needs 300 million sperm inside that, or at least a million sperm in there. What happens when little boys are young boys? They will produce sperm, but they don't produce it in an adequate amount until he is a more mature male. How long does that take? Well, if the little boy is 9 years old and and he has an ejaculate, then the probability that there's enough sperm in there is fairly remote. He's going to have to be much older than that in order to reproduce. The human body practices all the necessary functions before the function is actually needed. Babies will move inside the womb. The newborn will exercise its limbs. This is just something that all humans do. Pre-adolescent boys who have not been sexualized will experience the same reflexive activity with erections while they are asleep. So they'll wake up with an erection, and this is going on all night long. They will have erections, not all the time, of course, but from time to time they will have erections, and it's just their body practicing that this is something that they're going to have to do in the future. This activity will continue all their lives as a brain checklist to make sure that all the equipment still works for the individual. And so a lot of times they'll wake up with an erection, or they'll wake up during the night and they will have an erection. It's just the way things work. It's the brain practicing and making sure that everything works properly. At about age 13, the male adolescent may have actual ejaculations of semen during his nightly erections. These are known as nocturnal emissions or wet dreams, and it is involuntary reflexive act. It's not like he wants this to happen to mess up his pajamas or whatever. It's that the body is practicing. The boy's first ejaculation is called spermarchy. First sperm, it's what spermarchy means. It may be several years before the sperm he produces are actually produced in large enough numbers and in correct form to actually impregnate. So it's not like he's going to go around and be able to impregnate anybody. It's going to be a number of years before everything comes together so that he can potentially reproduce. The sign of maturity for girls is menstruation, where the uterus prepares itself for implantation by the fertilized ova. The first menstruation is called menarche and occurs sometime around the 12th or 13th year. However, menarches can occur from age 10 to 17. Research shows that girls from affectionate families actually show a more delayed menarche. Girls from single mother homes and ones without affection in their families tended to reach menarche earlier than individuals who come from an affectionate home. While menstruation and sexuality have been taboo subjects in many areas of the world for a long time, doctors and other people who are aware of such things have noticed that menarche is happening earlier and earlier than it ever has before. And this is a phenomenon known as secular trend. There is a secular trend toward earlier and earlier menarche. So it may, whereas it normally, in the past anyway, the average was somewhere between age 17 and age 10 and age 17. Now it's happening sometimes at 8, sometimes at 9. Now, 8 years old is the 3rd grade, and of course, 10 years old is the 5th grade. This is just something that we're seeing, and there's a reason for this. They think that probably this has to do with better health due to better nutrition than we had in the past. Not as many people starving or having poor nutrition. Lower rates of communicable diseases due to immunizations. Greater access to health care. Children raised in homes of the non-biological parent have earlier onset puberty. This is something that we have noticed. Don't read anything into this. It's just that when people are thrown together with other individuals, individuals that aren't their relatives, they're more likely to mature faster. Synthetic hormones in the water supply is another reason. How does it get into the water supply? You don't want to know. We feed it to our beef, we feed it to our cows, and then the cows urinate, and of course it gets into the synthetic hormones get into the water supply through beef urine. Stressful family environment may also cause the problem. Cultural differences. This is an average in the United States. This is something that's happening in the United States, but other places things are a little bit different. Kikuyu boys show puberty before females. With all other groups, um, the female starts her puberty earlier. But Kikuyu, which is a tribe in Africa, the boys show puberty before the females. In China, the Chinese girls develop pubic hair before breast buds. And of course, it's the opposite in the Western world. They start growing breasts, as we saw from that secondary sexual characteristic. These are Chinese young Chinese adolescents. African American girls develop breast buds and pubic hair earlier than white girls do. And there you go. That's just something the way it works. Hormonal changes in puberty. Girls and boys follow very different hormonal paths at this life stage. As you can see, testosterone level for males just explodes. And of course, both males and females have estradiol and testosterone. Testosterone will become the young lady's sex drive. So she does have some testosterone, but of course, males have a lot more. Estradiol, boys have estradiol as well, but young females, of course, they have much, much more than the boys do, 8 times as much. And boys have 20 times as much testosterone as females do. Timing the physical changes of puberty, skin oil and sweat, underarm hair. Boys and girls start smelling, start putting off odors. They're not really sexual odors. They're just odors. Okay, it stinks. And of course, they start wearing deodorant and everything's fine. Underarm hair. You can see menarche, change in voice, growth spurt, breast development, pubic hair. It all starts. And of course, anyway, as far as females are concerned, their breasts grow before their pubic hair grows. But as far as boys are concerned, well, boys don't have breasts. So. Early maturation in males leads to more poised, relaxed, good-natured individuals. They tend to be popular with their peers. They're likely to be leaders. They're less impulsive than late maturers. So what we will see is that if you're a male becoming a man is earlier in life is a boon. It's a very positive thing. Late maturation in males leads to feeling more inadequate, self-conscious, rejected, and dominated. And in reality, they are, of course, because they are smaller. They haven't grown. They haven't grown yet, and so they tend to be dominated by the individuals that have matured early. They're more dependent, aggressive, insecure, or depressed because of their status as a subordinate. Someone who hasn't developed yet. They have more conflict with parents and more trouble in school than the early maturing males. They have poorer social and coping skills, and they think less of themselves. They have low self-esteem. And this is because they're behind, and they feel behind. Early maturation in females leads to being less sociable, being less expressive, being less poised, more introverted and shy, being more vulnerable to psychological distress and remain so at least through the mid-teens. They're more negative about menarche than later maturing girls. They're more likely to become sexually active with older boys. I had a student when I was teaching at Mississippi University for women. And she was an early maturing female. Precociously. At age 6, she started growing breasts. By the time she was in the 3rd grade, she looked like she had completed her maturation by the time she was in her 3rd grade. in the third grade. Now she's a third grader, okay? She's 8 years old. Here she is. She's completely mature. She's taller. She's larger breasted than any of her peers. Everybody hated her, except the high school boys. And the high school boys would not leave her alone. She got to the point where um, she hated herself because she was such a freak. And eventually she decided that she didn't want to have anything to do with boys, and because they were just wouldn't leave her alone. It was just horrible for her. Anyway, eventually she, this was in Columbus, Mississippi. She bought up half of the town, and now she owns like everything in Columbus, Mississippi. As weird as that is. Anyway, she owns a lot of stuff in Columbus. She was one of my students. Interesting story, just fascinating story. I really felt sorry for her. You can imagine, the boys just wouldn't leave her alone. And this was in Mississippi, where it's a little bit more macho area, so it was just miserable for her. Late maturing females tend to be happier than their early maturing peers. They seem to enjoy the protection of childhood into adolescence. They're more likely to do well and stay in school. They become sexually active later. They're more likely to go to college. So if you're a female, it's better to be a late maturing female. If you're a male, it's better to be an early maturing male. Um, if you're a late maturing male, you feel inadequate. If you're an early maturing female, you feel like a freak because you look like uh, you're already a sexual animal, and probably your mind isn't there yet. Physical activity improves strength and endurance. It helps build healthy bones and muscles. It helps control weight. It reduces anxiety and stress, and it increases self confidence. So, this is not a bad idea to exercise. Sleep needs: adolescents or pre adolescents who have irregular sleep schedules are chronically sleep deprived and sleepy in the daytime. They show symptoms of depression and do poorly in school. And this is one of the reasons why we need to be very cognizant of the sleep pattern of the children that we come in contact with. And they can become depressed because they're not sleeping enough. Nutrition and eating disorders. Obesity is the most common eating disorder in the United States due to too little physical activity and poor eating habits. By age 15, more than half the girls in 16 countries are dieting or think that they should be dieting. Anorexia nervosa, a distorted body image, leads to eating very little or starving oneself, inability to maintain body weight, fear of weight gain, lack of menstruation, distorted body image. Some researchers have found a connection between anorexic daughters and competitive mothers. When my daughter was, when we were stationed in California, we were in Riverside, California. My daughter was playing freshman basketball, and one of the cheerleaders for the varsity team was anorexic, and they had to kick her off the team because they were afraid that she would break some of her body parts. Um, so they had to. She was really slender, and they at first they liked it because they could. She wasn't very heavy, so they could toss her, and she could do all kinds of interesting flips. But then they had to kick her off the team because she was anorexic, and they were afraid she'd break a body part. Bulimia nervosa tends, these individuals tend to maintain normal weight and recognize abnormal eating patterns. They go on huge eating binges within a short period of time, usually 2 hours or less, and then they try to undo the high caloric intake by vomiting or strict dieting or fasting. They engage in excessive, vigorous exercise. They'll take laxatives, enemas, or diuretics to purge their body of all the excess weight that they've taken in. So they're using some mechanical method to get rid of all to get rid of all the weight that they have taken in with the binge eating. Eating disorders are more common in cultures that emphasize slimness. Treatment options, hospitalization, medication, psychotherapy. Effectiveness, 1/3 of individuals treated for anorexia remain ill. It doesn't work for them. They think that this is the way that they're supposed to be. They literally have a distorted body image where this looks good, where being skeletal looks good. 1/2 of individuals treated for bulimia will relapse because, once again, if the culture tells them they have to be slim, that's what they want to look like. They continuing problems as individuals dealing with these disorders age. So they will always, especially somebody that's anorexic, despite the fact that they are no longer anorexic, they will still maintain a body mass that is less than it should be. Substance abuse is the harmful use of alcohol or other drugs, a poorly adapted behavior pattern lasting more than 1 month. That is substance abuse. Substance dependence or addiction may be a psychological or a physiological problem, or both of them. Likely continues into adulthood. Substance abuse and substance dependence. While substance use is rare before adolescence, it is common by the end of adolescence. By graduation, rates of marijuana use by seniors is higher than cigarettes. Substance use is highest in Native American and lowest in African American and Asian Americans. While teenage substance use has gone down in comparison to previous generations, it is still much higher than it is comfortable for society. And when the abuse is in your family, it is, of course, a serious tragedy. So I do have substance abuse in my family, my brother's family. It is during adolescence that many teenagers are introduced to their first step on a possible road to adult addiction. The gateway drugs are drugs that in and of themselves are not seriously addictive, but drugs that set a precedent of need that can only be fulfilled with more of the gateway drugs or stronger, more addictive drugs. Usually this is not really the pattern. The pattern is they start smoking first, then they turn to alcohol, and then they turn to marijuana. If they go through this pattern, nicotine, smoking, drinking, and smoking pot, then the next step is, how am I going to get, the marijuana's not doing it for me anymore. I need something else. So then they'll go to crystal meth or heroin or whatever, and always looking for the next and better high. Oh, let's stop talking about drugs. Romantic relationships increase over time. Asian cultures later than other groups, and we talked about this. I think I've talked about this before. Um, New studies have come out about the Japanese. They did a survey, and what they discovered was that 1/3 of all Japanese over age 30 are still virgin. So of course they delay sexual intercourse until they're much older. Romance is less formal than previous years. Relationships and sexuality are viewed differently due to culture. Permissive cultures tolerate sexuality, and ours is a more permissive society now. If you watch movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it was a less permissive culture then. It is more permissive now. Semi-restrictive cultures have prohibitions. Restrictive cultures have strong prohibitions. And of course, we can think of the various cultures around the world and which ones are restrictive and which ones are semi-restrictive. In actuality, our culture isn't nearly as permissive as other cultures are. I would have to say that the American culture is semi-restrictive. There are prohibitions. Some European countries are far more permissive, and some Middle Eastern countries are very restrictive as far as sexuality is concerned. Something happened in India. A Muslim father in India, his daughter had an affair with somebody, and he beheaded her, and he carried her severed head to the police office and turned himself in. But the reason he did it was an honor killing. His daughter had dishonored his family, the family, so he killed her, he beheaded her. That I would say that's a fairly restrictive culture. That's a lot. That's a pretty strong prohibition. 47.8% of U.S. high school students have had sexual intercourse. This is according to studies. This worries some researchers because adolescents are not emotionally mature enough to handle the aftermath of sexual activity. Only about two-thirds of adolescents protect themselves by using a condom. Teenage pregnancy is always a possibility as far as sex is concerned. When my daughter was going to high school in Plattsmouth, Nebraska, there was a cheerleader who had 5 abortions before she was graduated from high school. And eventually, the individual that was impregnating her through all those high school years married her, and they were unable to have children. That's not true. They have 3 children now. I'm sorry. I apologize. That was the somebody else that had a problem with it. Worldwide, individuals below the age of 25 account for 45% of all HIV infections. 11% of all births in the world are to teenage mothers, and this is a teenage mother. This little girl is only 5 years old. While individuals between the ages of 15 and 24 only represent 25% of the population, they represent 50% of all sexually transmitted diseases. This is the youngest girl that ever had a baby. She gave birth at 5 years and 7 months. She was impregnated when she was 4. She's from Peru. She's a Peruvian. And this is her little baby, and this is her, as you can imagine. Both her child and this was back in 1939. So she's very old now. She is still alive. Her son died at age 40 of leukemia, but it didn't have anything to do with. As you can see, this is her at 7 months pregnancy. She looks like the Octomom. Anyway, she's the youngest girl that ever ever impregnated. And of course, you can ask the question, who impregnated her? And they determined it wasn't her father. So, but she never said who did it, who was the father. Anyway, that's the youngest girl. Her name was Lena. First name was Lena. I can't remember her last name. Anyway, she eventually got married and had 2 other children. So all's well that ends well, I guess. Teenage pregnancy rates in developing countries. As you can see, the United States has the highest teenage pregnancy rate of all of these countries. By quite a bit, actually. This is the United States. Canada's way down here. About, oh golly, less than half. Where's Great Britain? United Kingdom. Anyway. The APA has recently defined the changing sexual mores in the United States as sexualization, a social phenomenon where people are valued for their sexual appeal and behavior and nothing else. This is especially a current problem with females as we are bombarded by Sports Illustrated swimsuit models and Victoria's Secret angels walking around in their underwear. It isn't hard to see how girls might base their self-worth on identifying as sexual beings. And of course, this is something that the Me Too movement is trying to change, this whole concept that females are only worth something because they are sexual beings. Piaget's stage of formal operations usually develops around age 11. Individuals develop the capacity for abstract thought, leading to a new, more flexible way to manipulate information. They can use symbols, they can understand metaphor and allegory, they can imagine possibilities and can form and test hypotheses. Formal operations give the individual the ability to perform abstract thought, such as historical time, understanding that that when we're talking about the Long Walk, 1868, that it was 150 years ago, and you can project yourself back 150 years, and you're thinking, yeah, that's 150 years ago. This is what people were wearing. This is how people were acting. Extraterrestrial space, the concept of space. Some people have a difficult time understanding that on Earth we have gravity, and on Earth we have atmosphere. And if we go out into space, there is nothing. That it's just a big empty. Algebra and calculus. This is my son is a mathematician, allowing symbols to represent other symbols. The reality is that mathematics, when you're talking about the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that is, even those symbols are abstract representations of something. Okay, so if you don't understand me, maybe you're not at formal operations. Think in terms of what might be, not just what is. And of course, that might have something to do with video games or whatever. Can think in context of idealism. This would be great if this is the way things were. Piaget's formal operation stage of cognitive development allows the individual to form hypotheses and develop means to test the hypothesis through deductive reasoning. Other developmental psychologists, including the author of your textbook, have estimated that between 1/3 and 1/2 of late adolescents and adults do not develop or do not use abstract thought. And why don't they? Because they don't have to. If you're a college student, of course, then I will make you use abstract thought or try to get you to engage in abstract thought. If you graduate from high school, they don't do that in high school. In high school, they don't force you to think in more mature ways. And so if potentially, if you graduate from high school and never go to college, you're never forced to think in this abstract way. Though adolescents may look like adults, most adolescents, especially males, do not yet have a mature prefrontal lobe. Studies looking at the activities of the brain found that while adults tended to process emergency information in the prefrontal lobe, where reasonable thought takes place, adolescents process the information through the amygdala, where emotional arousal and instinctual thought takes place. This may account for increased impulsive, risky behavior, especially in males, and account for driving, drug use, and the feeling that they need to engage in sexual activity or be violent with select individuals. And I've got, this is really kind of, well, let me read this part first, and then I'll show you The Wild in the Streets. This is a really bad movie from 1968. Elkind felt that immature aspects of adolescent thought manifest itself in at least 6 characteristic ways. And of course, we're going to go through those 6 characteristic ways. One of them is idealism and criticalness. They are convinced that they know better than adults how to run the world. And another is argumentativeness. They often become argumentative as they marshal facts and logic to build their case. Now, the idealism and criticalness has to do with Wild in the Streets. They are convinced that they know better than adults and they know how to run the world, and adults are messing things up. This is a really bad movie from 1968, Wild in the Streets. Whoops, there we go. I hope you can hear this.
We're going to make 30 a mandatory retirement age. And we're going to set up rehabilitation camps, mercy centers in every state of the Union. Citizens will report to them after 5 years, at the age of 35. And there, in groovy surroundings, we're gonna psych them all out on LSD, babies. They're not gonna hurt you, and they're not gonna hurt me. And babies, they're not even gonna hurt themselves anymore. They won't draft us. We'll draft them. And some of them are really gonna dig it. And that's gonna be the real mother-loving gas. There's gonna be cats who wanna split from taxes, diners club, crazy birds, crazy wives, and crazy husbands. Millions, true, but millions are gonna go willingly. Just tell them they don't owe nobody nothing. And baby, what a wrap-up.
Suffer unto me, little old lady. The best campaign dinners are no campaign dinners. Contribute to yourself. The best campaign dinners are no campaign dinners. Contribute to yourself. Plato, baby, your husband is very happy in the camps. Your husband would like you to join him. Max would like you to join him. You are the biggest mother of them all.
Hawaii, the only state which has not voted for Max, was given a lethal overdose in total of STP. The survivors are a weird, party breed now, largely nomadic and strangely ill-coordinated. They do not seem to understand what has happened to them.
Okay. The whole point, the whole point of that movie is that the guy that was talking in the beginning, he was a rock and roll star. He was a frontman for a rock and roll group, and they used LSD, and they were running into politicians that were calling them horrible names, and so they decided to put LSD in the water supply in Washington D.C. and then take over all these major cities by putting LSD in the water supply. Dumb movie. As you could see, these young guys were very idealistic. They're very critical of their adults. This is 1968. It was made in 1968. The war in Vietnam started in 1965. By 1968, they were drafting 500,000 men into the military every year. Anyway, that was a really strange movie. With the idea that they're very idealistic and very critical. And you heard him say that everybody's going to love it. Obviously, that's not what happened. Anyway, okay, so all kind has these immature aspects of adolescence. One of them is idealism and criticalness. Another is argumentativeness. If I can make this thing work, there we go. Indecisiveness. Adolescents can keep many alternatives in their mind at the same time, yet they lack the effective strategies for choosing among them. They won't make a decision. This happened to my son. I graduated from high school. He was a track star, and he had all these job offers. He had all these scholarship offers, and he had a real hard time deciding where he would go to school. Eventually ended up at Purdue in Indiana, and didn't like it. So after the first semester, I brought him back to Nebraska. We were living in Nebraska at the time, and he went to a local college. And he ran track there, but eventually he ran cross country for Purdue. But then didn't quite make it. Couldn't make up his mind. He made his decision on going to law school, and of course, he not only did he not go to law school, but he didn't even study law. He didn't. He rejected all these schools because they didn't have a good law program, and he eventually decided he didn't want to do that. Indecisiveness. Adolescents can keep many alternatives. Okay, we've already talked about that. Apparent hypocrisy. Teens do not recognize the difference between expressing an ideal and making the sacrifices necessary to live up to their ideals. Self-consciousness. Adolescents often assume everyone else is thinking about the same thing that they're thinking about. Usually it's themselves, and this is a concept known as imaginary audience. Specialness and invulnerability. Adolescents think that they are special and that their experience is unique, and that they are not subject to rules that govern the rest of the world, and this is known as a personal fable. Kohlberg's theory, this is a picture of Kohlberg. He was a professor of philosophy and psychology at Harvard. He came up with how we develop moral reasoning, and this is the story that he told people. Contrary to socialization theory, which attributes moral behavior to early upbringing and internalization of societal standards, the cognitive developmental approach holds that people gradually develop their own moral code as they reach higher and higher levels of thinking. And we're going to talk about these different levels as the people come up with on their own. And that's Kohlberg right there. And this is a story that he told. He told Heinz's moral dilemma. And this is how he developed his theory of reasoning. This is the story. In Europe, a woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for the small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or let him pay later. But the druggist said, "No, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it." So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done that? And that's the moral dilemma. Should the husband have stolen the? Should he have done that? Pre-conventional morality, and these are the areas of reasoning, moral reasoning that Kohlberg discovered from giving this moral puzzle, this moral dilemma to a number of people. Level 1 is pre-conventional morality. People act under external controls, obeying rules to avoid punishment or to get rewards. This is normally how people think between the ages of 4 and 10. Stage 1, orientation toward punishment and obedience. He can steal the drug because it is really worth only $200. He shouldn't steal it. It's a crime. That's stage 1. Stage 2, conforming to the rules because of self-interest. It is all right to steal because he wants to save his wife's life. Stage 2, he shouldn't steal because it is all right to make a profit. That's level 1. Level 2 is conventional morality. People are concerned about being good, pleasing others, and maintaining the social order. And this is something that children start thinking about when they can think abstractly. Stage 3, maintaining mutual relations, approval of others, following the golden rule. A good husband should steal the drug. And the negative concept is he shouldn't steal. If his wife dies, it won't be his fault. As long as he's not blamed for it, then it's okay. Stage 4, developing a social concern and consciousness. He should steal it, otherwise his wife's death is his fault. The negative aspect, it is always wrong to steal despite the reasoning. Now, the vast majority of people in the world never get beyond conventional morality. But stage 3 is post-conventional morality, as far as Kohlberg is concerned. Post-conventional morality that recognizes the conflicts between moral standards and make their own judgments on the basis of principles of right, fairness, and justice. In other words, they've come up with their own standards. Stage 5, morality of contract of individual rights and of democratically accepted laws. Taking the drug may not be right, but it is justified. The negative answer to that would be extreme circumstances do not justify breaking the law. And stage 6, morality of universal ethical principles. Heinz is morally right to steal. He must respect the sanctity of life. And the negative aspect is that Heinz should act in accordance with all lives affected. In other words, he should not only worry about his wife, but he should also worry about the druggist and what is going on with the druggist. Okay. Now, as I told you before, conventional morality is as far as most people get. Post-conventional morality is a little bit more, is far more abstract than most people like to think. Instead of viewing morality solely as attaining control over self-gratifying impulses, investigators now look at how children make moral judgments based on their growing understanding of the social world. Neither Kohlberg nor Piaget considered parents important in moral development. Both psychologists grew up in a time where social control was stronger than individual or familial control. Other researchers have discovered that when parents speak to and listen to their children about their morality, children tend to advance through the stages of moral development faster. And of course, there are 6 stages. There are three. What do they call them? 3 levels. There are 6 stages of moral development. And the more you converse with your children, the more you talk to them about morality, the farther along they will get in dealing with moral issues. Morality, of course, may be in the eye of the beholder. Kohlberg may do little but reflect Western morality and assume that it is universal. And of course, this is a problem that we have had in the Western world for an extended length of time. The idea is that the Western world is the epitome of civilization. Um, when the Western man came to the Americas, they assumed that they were whatever they thought was the epitome. That any other thinking, any other way of looking at things was incorrect, was primitive, um, and they did horrible things to the indigenous peoples of the Americas because of it. But the reality is that there are cultures and there are civilizations that are different from Western civilization. Western ideas are not universal. China has had that area of Asia. That area of Asia has had civilization for a much longer period of time than anything in Europe. Whether you're talking about Egypt or Greece or Rome, Western thought is not the only way of thinking. And of course, that's one of the reasons why Dene College is so important, because as far as they're concerned, as far as Western thought is concerned, then Dene College needs to teach all Western ideas. But the reality is, of course, your ideas are just as important and as civilized as Western morality. When they looked at this, they discovered that Western morality was not universal. Buddhist monks in India actually scored lower on Kohlberg's dilemma than lay people did. Some feel that Kohlberg's stage 5 and 6 are possible only for individuals following a specific type of philosophical reflection. And of course, that's what happens when you think in absolutes. And unfortunately, I think that's what happened with Kohlberg. Right and wrong has different meanings in other cultures, and a good example would be the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor. As far as the Japanese were concerned, that was a smart thing to do. A sneak attack makes a lot of sense. You don't want to tell your enemy that you're coming, because you can do a lot more damage that way. And of course, as far as the Japanese were concerned, they didn't do anything wrong. And if you ask them to this day, they will tell you that they didn't do anything wrong. Okay, we're talking about morality issues, the death penalty. If I asked you if the death penalty was good or bad, of course you would have your own ideas as far as the death penalty is concerned. 66% of the individuals thought that 66% of the individuals that they surveyed thought that the death penalty was acceptable. 27% thought that it was unacceptable. And of course, we're having a debate about the death penalty now. It's going to come up it's going to be decided by the Supreme Court again. Divorce, is divorce good? Is divorce acceptable or is it unacceptable? If you are a member of select religious groups, you think that divorce is not acceptable, and other individuals. Remember, divorce was illegal in the United States until the 1960s. So before that, almost everybody thought divorce was horrible, was the worst thing in the world. So you have your ideas. Is divorce acceptable or not? 65% of people that they surveyed thought that divorce was morally acceptable. 26% thought that divorce was morally unacceptable. And the Catholic Church believes that divorce is unacceptable. So there's a whole portion of the population that thinks the divorce is sinful. Medical research using stem cells obtained from human embryos. Is this acceptable or not? This became an issue during the second Bush administration, not the father, but the son, George W. Bush. He vetoed it. It was passed through Congress that they could use human embryo stem cells, and um, he vetoed the bill so that they can't use stem cells. And to this day, in the United States, we cannot do any stem cell research using human embryos. But 64% of the individuals thought it was morally acceptable to use stem cells, and 30% did not. They thought it was morally wrong. Gambling, is gambling good or bad? You know, you have your own feelings. Of course, there are two, aren't there? Aren't there two casinos on the Navajo reservation? Is it okay? And the answer was 63% that thought that it was morally wrong to gamble. 32% thought it was morally acceptable. So you're making money off of 32% of the population because 63% of the people think it's morally incorrect or not right to gamble. I don't gamble because if I'm going to give money away, I'd rather give it away to somebody that I know than somebody that I don't know. Suicide, is it morally acceptable or not? And oops, sorry. For some reason, I left it out. Anyway, most people think that suicide is morally reprehensible. Cloning humans, should we clone humans? 11% thought that cloning humans was acceptable, and 86% thought it was unacceptable. Polygamy, when one husband has more than one wife at the same time. And of course, yeah, that's his wife and that's his wife. And these are his children from both women. So is polygamy acceptable or unacceptable? And the answer is 8% thought that polygamy was acceptable, 90% thought it was unacceptable. Married men and women having an affair, is that okay? This is General Petraeus. He's a 4-star general. He was the one that running the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is a newspaper lady, and he had an affair with her. And of course, he had to retire because this was all discovered. Anyway, is that right or is that wrong? Should married men have affairs with women that aren't their wives? As we saw earlier, what was it? 61% of men had sex. In 1910, 61% of men had sex before marriage, and only 21% of women had. So it was fairly acceptable at that time. 6% thought that affairs were acceptable. 91% thought that it was unacceptable. Medical testing on animals. How do you feel about medical testing on animals? 59% thinks it's acceptable. 37% think that it's unacceptable. Sex between unmarried man and an unmarried woman. Of course, this was called fornication. It's against the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So if a man has sex with a woman who he's not married to, if neither of them are married, is that acceptable? It's called fornication. And the answer is 59% think it's okay to have for unmarried sex, and 38% thought it was unacceptable. Okay. Problem solving. As children grow into adolescence, their problem solving skills continue to improve. Adolescents develop the ability to carefully consider a problem using whatever steps and in whatever order necessary, a process known as task analysis. If you're going to change your tire, the first thing you need to do is take your tire and your lift jack out of the trunk. The next thing you need to do is loosen the lug nuts. and then you need to jack the tire up. Then you take the lug nuts completely off, remove the tire, put on the new tire, put on the lug nuts, tighten them down, not completely, tighten them so that it won't slip. Then you take the jack out, you lower the jack, and then when it's on the ground, you tighten them up completely. That's how you change a tire. And that's your task analysis. So if you were trying to figure out how to change a tire, and you took the lug nuts off first and took them off completely, then the tire may collapse. The car may collapse. You need to jack the thing up, at least get the jack under there. You need to loosen if you jack it up and then try to loosen the lug nuts, the tire will just spin. You won't be able to get it off. Anyway, after determining the process of problem solving, the individual will encode the process, and of course that's what I've done with changing a tire. The problem solving process and encoding the information is part of dialectical reasoning. As children age, their families become less and less important to them, and their peers and friends become more important. Influence shifts from the family to the friends, and this happens right in junior high school. In adolescence, this shift becomes more profound as peers begin taking up more and more time. Since masses of people are unwieldy, adolescents will form friendship groups that will become very important to the high school-aged individual. Adolescents who have similar desires and interests will tend to interact with one another on a frequent basis, forming a crowd. And of course, these are names of different groups, different crowds: jocks, populars, nerds, grunges, goths, thugs, and brains are just some of the different crowds that you see in high schools. Normally, crowds are so large with people falling in and out so frequently that it is impossible to know everyone in the group. The small group of intimates that someone knows in a crowd is a clique. And of course, this is an anime clique in Japan. All the girls are dressed up like anime characters. High school is no picnic anywhere. This is the groups that they talk about in Japan. The jocks, the bad kids, the b-boys, the dumb sluts, the musicians, the players, the bullies, the drunken party people, the semi-dropout bikers, the skaters. These are the top group. In the middle are the norm ones, the wannabes, the better-looking nerds, the slackers, the goths, the artists, the mature ones who don't give a cuss about cliques. And then the ones that are the rejected people are the nerds, the ugly ones, the dorks, the targets, the outcasts, the floaters, the libs, if not good at sociability, and the grubbies. And of course, this is a group of Japanese high school girls who theoretically are up here somewhere. The dumb sluts, I don't know, the drunken party people, the semi-dropout bikers. This is the upper scale group. This is the middle scale group, and this is the people that everybody doesn't want to know. Aggression and bullying. Children who seek dominance and control may especially be sensitive to slights, provocations, or other threats to their status. Instrumental aggressors view force and coercion as effective ways to get what they want. Studies agree that children seeing televised violence act more aggressively, unfortunately. Erikson, identity versus identity confusion. Teenagers' effort to make a sense of the self, not a kind of maturational malaise. It is part of a healthy, vital process that builds on the achievements of earlier stages. And you have to go through the earlier stages before you can go through your identity versus identity confusion. The earlier stages of trust, autonomy, initiative, and industry. It lays the groundwork for coping with the crises that you will see in adult life. And I thought that was a pretty funny joke. After many years of therapy, Waldo finally finds himself. Find Waldo. Three major issues of identity: choice of occupation, you identify with who you are; values to believe in and live by; and satisfying sexual identity. This is somebody that is either dressed up for Halloween or he is a trans person. She's a trans person. This is a male, biological male that is dressed up like a female. Identity versus identity, confusion, cliquishness, and intolerance of differences, both hallmarks of adolescent social scene, are defenses against identity confusion. Individuals need a stable identity before reaching intimacy, and this may explain prolonged cohabitation and less frequent marriages. Marcia saw the struggle for individuation to establish one's own identity outside one's parents as represented by four types of identity status. The first type is identity achievement. It's where the crisis leads to commitment. Identity foreclosure is where the individual has commitment but has never been in crisis. Identity moratorium is where the individual is in crisis but has no commitment yet. And identity diffusion is where the individual has no commitment nor crisis. Normally, an individual will go through crisis, then they will achieve their identity. If no crisis has taken place, then they can't achieve they can't find their identity. Ethnic factors in identity formation. For some adolescents, ethnicity may be central to identity formation. Many minority youth feel conflicts between values stressed at home and those dominant in the wider society. Adolescence is a time when sexual orientation becomes obvious to the individual. Historically, people kept their sexual orientation secret, but now they're more likely to come out. Homophobia can make coming out traumatic. Parental rejection can be a concern. However, acceptance by peers may be increasing. Electronic games are especially popular among boys. 94% of middle school students play. 1/3 of boys play every day. 11% of girls play every day. We're talking about video games here. Favorite games involve violence that could be related to anxiety and depression. The use may be related to feelings of power, fame, and dealing with stress. The kids may be using the games to achieve a cathartic effect on negative feelings about themselves or about something that's happening to them in their lives. The great majority of crimes are committed by young people between the ages of 12 and 25. Crime rates peak about age 18 and then they begin to decline. This crime trend has been true for over 150 years. It is thought that this is true for two reasons: increased peer importance and independence from parents, and they are just choosing the wrong way to do these things. There are two types of delinquency: adolescents, limited delinquents who start getting into trouble as adolescents and stop with adulthood, and life course, where they have persistent delinquents start from birth and continue into adulthood. So either they are delinquents through adolescence and then they stop, or they continue to be bad people for the rest of their lives. Types of depression: depressed mood, enduring period of sadness, no other related symptom of depression, just a period of sadness. And then, of course, the other type is major depressive disorder. This is a clinical diagnosis. The symptoms are depressed mood, appetite disturbance, sleeping disturbance, and fatigue. Causes of depressed mood: conflicts in your life, disappointments in your life, poor performance in school. Girls are at a higher risk than boys are. There are two types of treatment: cognitive behavioral therapy and antidepressant medications. Resilience in adolescence, resilience is a good outcome in spite of threats to adaptation and development. Protective factors are high intelligence, effective parenting, adult mentor, high self-regulation, ethnic identity for minorities, and religiosity. All these things lead to resilience. And that is the end of the chapter. I will talk to you later if I can stop this thing.